My privilege and my pleasure to introduce again a man who probably doesn't need really any real introduction, but I'll make it anyway, to welcome back Terry Conrad to our fellowship. He is a Tibetan Buddhist teacher who's helped center the spiritual lives of many through teaching in the innate compassion and wisdom meditation here in Galveston, bringing guided meditation practice to people incarcerated in the Texas prison system, and speaking many times at our fellowship. He's going to speak today on, is there a true or accurate sense of self? This question is central to the relationship we have with a higher power, God or the universe. So we decide or posit that there is something more than just us living and dying, eating and sleeping, more to the earth, our relationship to the earth, which we are part, and the universe, than just a lot of spinning around. Finding a center or realizing bodhicitta is something Terry says each of us can do. He's going to discuss certain methods and approaches to increase that possibility. And he tells that for Buddhists, the term bodhicitta refers to what's considered the true or essential quality of our humanity, an awakened mind. Bodhi meaning awake or enlightened, and citta means mind, and that captures the awareness, wisdom, and virtue or compassion qualities central to who we are. Terry, welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you for, didn't expect applause, but that's always good. So this is a great topic. I think at some point in our life we kind of reach existential moments where we really wonder what it is all about. Who or what are we? Who am I? Is probably maybe one of the deeper questions that we ask ourselves. That offers us the opportunity to explore, to inquire, to investigate. But not always is that opportunity made available to us in a formal sense. I mean, we don't really get it in schools, and oftentimes when we go to churches, we're just talked to and kind of told how it is, rather than being invited to inquire as to how it is. And this is kind of central to the Buddhist approach, is asking the questions and knowing that there's really no finite answer, there's no absolute answer, but there are approaches, there are ways of understanding that can offer us a deeper sense of who we are, that has greater integrity with how our life is unfolding. So this term bodhicitta that Bruce quoted there is kind of a reference point. Oftentimes you hear bodhicitta being expressed as the wish for all beings to awaken. It's kind of the heart of a compassionate embrace of all humanity. And in that sense, enlightened or awakened heart, and citta being mind, and mind is pivotal here. And I don't pretend to be able to explain what mind is, but there are ways of inquiring into how it is and how it functions, how mind works with us, is innate to our being. And I think key to that is that we have this quality of bodhicitta, awakened heart mind, already within us. It's not something we have to go out and find or cultivate. It's a quality within us that's already present. And if it's, as the Buddha said, when I became enlightened, all beings became enlightened, meaning whatever it is that I was able to find, all beings have this same capacity. And this is true of bodhicitta. It's already within us, already present. Life can be very challenging, and we can be caught up in feelings of pain and guilt and suffering and regret. I know in working in the prisons for the last 20 years, it's been pretty amazing. one of the first things that I ask incarcerated students is, do you know in your heart of heart that you're a good person? And I get mostly positive response to that. Occasionally I'll get just an absolute no. I'm not a good person. And those are the ones I really like to work with, because it's obviously not really been pointed out to that person who they are or how they are. Maybe there was a very difficult childhood, abuse or abandonment or neglect or even indulgence. I mean, just all the range of parenting styles that can cause dysfunction. So, but for the most part, we know this, don't we? I mean, if I ask you this question, do you know that you're a good person? You do, don't you? You know in your heart of hearts, you're a good person. So that opens up the whole possibility of goodness, doesn't it? So then the next question, do you know that you are connected, interconnected with others, intimately connected with others? And oftentimes people that are incarcerated feel that they're not, feel that they've been kind of abandoned and of course, I don't want to get into the politics of it, but the mentality of our so-called Department of Justice, who relies upon punishment, a mentality that relies upon punitive ways of correction, miss the point. And that's a topic that we can go quite a bit more deeper into, but it's the idea that we don't live in isolation. We are interconnected. We're interdependent for anything and everything that we have in our lives. Clothes we wear, the food we eat, the house we live in, the car we drive, everything in our life is interconnected and interdependent with others. We can't escape it. We couldn't survive without it. Okay? So there's one individual that I've been working with for about 15 years who's been in isolation, who's been locked up in what they call ADSEG, administrative segregation. One cell, one man, 1 hour out of the cell every 24 hours. It's inhumane. It's totally inhumane. It's not offering anybody any hope to feel that we are isolated, right? So we can take hope and take strength in the fact that we are not isolated, right? We are interconnected, interdependent. Okay, how do we get to this? This is a challenge, right? I mean, we read, we study, we come to fellowship, right? And all of these ways we're strengthening exactly this bodhicitta, aren't we? Our capacity to unconditionally love all beings. This is another interpretation of the term bodhicitta. Our capacity to unconditionally love all beings. That can be challenging, can it? You look on the news, you hear of situations, hear of incidents, hear of individuals, particularly in this age of pretty much a lot of mass shootings. It's hard to imagine having unconditional love, but this is what Jesus taught, isn't it? Love God, love your neighbor, love yourself unconditionally. All the same. It's the same love. Loving God, loving your neighbor, loving yourself. It's the neighbor part that can get kind of hard, can't it? I'm not speaking about anybody in particular, right? Right. So how do we go about this? Well, I think one approach is to understand that we mature in different ways. And one of the ways we mature is physically, and we do that basically by staying healthy, right? The other way that we mature is intellectually, right? And we do that by taking an interest in the world, study, travel, all kinds of ways that we're learning. The third way that we mature is emotionally, which can be challenging, difficult. Confucius is quoted as saying, there are three ways to grow wise, mature. Uh, imitation is the easiest. Go to school, become an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, learn a trade. Just do what somebody else has done to live a successful life, right? Imitate basically what someone else is experiencing. So imitation is the easiest. Uh, um, experience is the most difficult, and this is kind of where the emotional maturity comes in. We just mature emotionally through experience, right? We have a difficult emotional experience. We learn from that. No, that's how that works. That's how this is. That's how I am. And the most difficult way of growing wise is meditation, which is the fourth maturity, spiritual maturity. And this is a lifetime process, isn't it? Maturing spiritually. And spiritual and emotional maturity are pretty closely aligned, aren't they? As we become more emotionally balanced, stable, we also have a deeper appreciation of kind of how we are with others and don't feel so separate from others, right? We're all going through the same kind of experience. So we all have bodhicitta, and we all mature in basically the same ways, right? So let's talk a little bit about then how we can enhance, or just some of the kind of the Buddhist view of how we can enhance emotional and spiritual maturity, how we can kind of grow up spiritually. And there's basically three ways to do that. We study, we go out and go to talks, go to fellowship again, like we were talking about. We think about or contemplate then what we've studied or what we've heard. So we take time, when we do that, when we take time to reflect on kind of what we're experiencing, how we're experiencing, what happens is we have insights, right? You have an insight, oh, that's how this is, that's how this is, that's how you are, that's how I am, right? And so study, contemplate, and meditate. So Confucius is saying meditation is the most noble way to grow wise, right? Meaning there's no real end there. There's no real product there. There's no real obvious benefit coming from meditation, but yet it's essential. And we're all naturally meditators. When I say this in a prison, that we're all natural meditators, they're kind of like, that kind of catches, because we are all naturally meditators, aren't we? What happens when something difficult, what do we do when something difficult happens? We just kind of find space, don't we? Take time for ourselves. Find a place where it's kind of quiet. Go sit on the beach, right? Take a drive, right? That's it. That's what we're doing. We're meditating. But it's maybe never really been pointed out that that's what we're doing, that that's how it works, right? So that's more of an informal, but there's also more formal kinds of meditation, obviously, where we actually do a formal practice, where we, sit, take time every day just to sit and be quiet and just look inward. And this is really what meditation is about. I'm not seeking some answer or solution outside. I'm not waiting for something else to happen. I'm just seeing what's already here. So what happens in a meditation is I notice thoughts. I notice feelings. I notice thoughts coming and going. I'm less dependent or less defined by thoughts or feelings, because I see them coming and going, right? Meaning that they're impermanent. They're not totally reliable, not totally trustable, because I can feel one way one moment and feel another way another moment. So in meditation, I'm just observing this. I'm just allowing this and gaining insight. Right? This is kind of I call insight the inner wisdom, right? Kind of bubbling up, percolating up, right? Our inner wholeness just kind of, that's how that is. Oh, that's what's going on. Aha kind of moments, right? We all have them, don't we? And the fact that we all have them is evidence of the fact that we're naturally meditators. It's just part of life already. So for people like myself, and I'm sure many of you, that kind of want to go deeper with that, then we engage in a more formal practice of meditation, taking time to sit every day, just to have those moments of just really nothing to gain, nothing to improve, right? Nothing to seek, nothing to find, just allowing ourselves to just be exactly as we are. And what we recognize here is that our being is the bodhicitta. We're not so critical, we're not so judgmental, right? Negativity, reactivity, just tends to lessen itself. This is part of the process. So I got a little crib sheet here. There's all kinds of like ways of referencing this, right? Ways of framing this. And one of the ways that we use to kind of recognize ourselves is what we call the 6 perfections, paramitas, right? The 6 perfections. Ways of recognizing our innate bodhicitta. So kind of the first perfection is generosity. Feels good to be generous, doesn't it? Feels good to be contributing to the fellowship. Feels good to just be here, right? There's a generosity just in being here, isn't there? A willingness to participate, to take part, right? Or being generous with a difficult moment, right? Being generous with ourselves, right? Not so quick to judge ourselves, to be critical or negative of ourselves is an expression of generosity. Ethical self-discipline. We know it feels good to do the right thing, right? So we develop kind of a sense of right and wrong. Right? This is appropriate, this is not appropriate. We already have that, don't we? It's pointed out to us as a child oftentimes, and even as adults, right? That we could be a little bit more ethical. But we already have this sense of kind of what's beneficial and what's not, what's helpful and what's not, don't we? So that's one of the paramitas. Of course, patience is a big one. Right? Standing in a grocery line while somebody waits till everything's bagged up before they start digging around to find their checkbook, right? Right? Or somebody's sitting at a stoplight texting, right? I mean, we all have these moments, right? And just allowing that to be a moment of patience. Right? I'm glad I didn't say something. I'm glad the sense of just being patient, not just with others, but then also with ourselves. Again, not so quick to judge, not so quick to react, right? Effort, right? Just making an effort, making the effort, whatever it takes to come and join in on a fellowship, to pick up and read a book, to have a regular meditation and a prayer and meditation session, right, with ourselves. The effort is we already have that. We don't have to. I mean, of course, we can develop it like all the paramitas are where we can do some work, but we have the basis upon which to do that work. That's the important part. And then the last 2 are wisdom and meditation. You are innately wise. You have wisdom. You know that. You make good choices. Right? We wouldn't have lived this long if we weren't able to make a few good choices, right? And then the meditation part is just being aware of being aware. And this is really what a meditation is all about, is increasing our ability to be aware. We're all aware, all right? We look in the mirror, we can look around, we can take care of life. We couldn't do anything without awareness. So we already are all aware. But the challenge is being more aware of being aware. Being aware of awareness. Right? One of my teachers says, being. He just keeps saying it, Okay, yeah. Right. Right. So aware of being aware. And this is what we really cultivate in meditation, prayer and meditation. It's more mindful, more present, more aware. Okay. So I don't know how am I doing on time, Bruce? What's our schedule here? How much time do I have? Oh, well, that's dangerous. Yeah, you go hungry if that's the case. Yeah, okay, let's start. So, I'm a teacher, not a preacher. So on that note, I'd like to open it up. Just any questions or inquiries or comments that may have been provoked by this kind of brief exchange? I mean, just shout out. Anyone? Please, Kathleen. Sorry? Paramita, yeah, 6 paramitas, yeah. Well, I went over them pretty quickly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Generosity, yeah. What's the second one, Linda? There you go. Ethical self-discipline, patience, right? Effort, perfect effort, wisdom and meditation. And what makes them perfect is that each one is informing the other. As I'm becoming more generous, I'm also going to be more patient, aren't I? I'm also going to make better choices, be more ethical, So you can see how each one of these informs the other. So by practicing one, we're really practicing them all. But yeah, thank you. Yeah. Anybody else? Please, Steve.
What you said at the beginning of the service, there was a book I read many years ago, The Tao of Physics, where what you said at the beginning of the service is exactly what it says in Taoism. So, in your opinion, how much do you think Buddhism was influenced by Taoism?
Oh, it's like they're all perfect in the sense that all of these traditions have been informing one another. I mean, if you get into the history of it a little bit, there's incredible cross-fertilization from Greece, to India, to what am I trying to say? Egypt. All over. Very early, and we're talking 4,000 years prior to the Common Era. So very much influence one another. I mean, Buddhism basically comes out of Hinduism, doesn't it? Much of the Upanishads and were some of the earliest spiritual writings that we know of, and influenced Hinduism. It's widely rumored that Jesus, traveled over into India, so Christianity, certainly came out of that, as well as many other traditions in the Middle East. All have cross-fertilized, for years. So yeah, the Tao is, more Chinese, right? And the Chan Buddhist tradition, which is translated as Zen in Japan, right? All of these are influencing one another. Yeah. This is an old question. Do we have a center? Do we have a sense? Is there a true sense of a self? And one of the earliest things the Buddha talked about was one of the strongest things that influences or reinforces a sense of self is an identity that makes assumptions, has expectations, has opinions, has beliefs, right? I mean, one of the earliest Buddhist teachings is don't believe in anything. That's pretty challenging, right? But what it's doing is it's softening this kind of rigid boundaries where if I believe this and you believe something else, now we're going to have this could be a conflict, right? We could end up in an argument, end up in a war, which we certainly have seen happen. Right? So yeah, all of these traditions are cross-fertilizing. Let's have somebody else. Yeah, Sandra. How I approach that? I try and be very convincing. But just by pointing out, have you ever made a good choice? Have you ever really cared about somebody else? Has anybody else ever really cared about you? Right? Just kind of pointing out kind of what's obvious, right? That we have these life experiences, but because we're quick to judge or quick to react or one of the most common things in prison is kind of an inveterate negativity. And it's not so much coming from inmates as it's coming institutionally. Very disrespectful. Yeah. And every once in a while I'll meet an officer who just has this radiance of empathy and compassion about them. Right? Our greatest quality is love, isn't it? Our greatest power is love. And if anything we're learning throughout all of our maturing, it's that power, isn't it? That we have within us this capacity to love. And if we can love one, we can love all. And the only reason we couldn't love all is because we're making up something about them that is causing us to react negatively, right? We're making up a story. Oh, this is who they are. We don't see them as who they truly are. We don't see so we want to see ourselves as we truly are, whole, complete, right? Already aware, already virtuous. I like to put awareness and virtue together. I make one word out of awareness and virtue. Awareness, virtue, right? Virtue is our capacity to love unconditionally. Right? And awareness is everything that we experience. So I just try and point this out, it takes time. Sometimes I'll repeat the question, are you getting any better about your own goodness? But you see it. Sometimes I don't even have to ask. You can just see it, as we start to meditate and have fellowship together, it transforms it. Did I see one other hand? I thought I saw another hand. Please. Well, I've had personal visits. Yeah. I became certified as a volunteer chaplain in the TDCJ system, which allows me to kind of move pretty much anywhere in the unit. And I can go into ADSEG and some of these other parts of the prisons where a regular visitor or volunteer couldn't go. So yeah, a number of years ago I did that, and then by letter. I have a correspondence course that I do with inmates all over the country. We have over 2,500 students. And it's a course called the Lojong, which means mind training. Yeah. And, or attitude transformation is another translation for Lojong. And attitude, I didn't mention attitudes, did I? I mentioned opinions and assumptions and beliefs, but attitudes, those are big. And we hold on to those to kind of say, this is who I am, right? So we're in transforming attitudes, what we're doing is changing, what is it in the recovery community, an attitude of gratitude, right? And that's very helpful. It's very, very helpful. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? Please. Yeah, I have. I mean, I've been on dial-up for a few guys that have gotten out. It's not common, right? But I also qualified as a mentor. There's a mentorship program in TDC, and even though we're not necessarily registered as a mentor, but every once in a while I'll have one of them call me up. I don't know how they get my number, but Yeah. Internet. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Betsy. Uh-huh.
Is there a female counterpart doing this in the women's prison?
Well, I can go to the women's prison as well, and I have, but there are women volunteers, Buddhist women volunteers. Yeah. 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 Miyoki Kane Burnett, who runs the Nichiren Shu temple up in North Houston, is very active in the prison system. There's a young gal named Patty, who is part of a Vietnamese temple in Pearland, and she goes to a number of units. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good question. Yeah. Anybody else? Thank you.